From our studios in Scottsdale, Arizona, this is Retirement News Online. And today, when it comes to financial planning and investment decisions, there's a lot of talk about risk. Now, there are two key concepts that are often used interchangeably but have distinctly different meanings: risk tolerance and risk capacity. While tolerance really refers to an individual's psychological willingness to take on risk, risk capacity really relates more to the financial ability to endure potential losses. And joining us is Alex Peyton with Actus Wealth Strategies in Acadiana, Louisiana. What do I need to know about Acadiana that I don't know?
Food.
Okay,
food,
that makes sense.
Food, good culture, nice people. It's a place you wanna. It's a place you don't just want to visit. It's a place you want to live.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
You're a good salesperson. I'm going to come there. So when you talk to a client, they probably think of risk tolerance, right?
Yes.
They may not even be familiar with capacity. How do you kind of talk about the difference between the two?
You had touched on something already, that a lot of times they're used interchangeably, and I find that to be it doesn't really do justice to either one of them. So I tend to tell clients that risk tolerance is how you feel, how you go to bed at night after the market's down 2%. Right? It's that feeling in your stomach of if you're going to wake up and if the market's going to continue going down, or if we're going to get a little bit of a relief bump, right? Whereas risk capacity is more structural. It's what your portfolio or your financial life can actually tolerate. I like to use the example sometimes of a bridge, right? When engineers are building a bridge, they have to make sure that there's a little bit of sway. Too much sway and the bridge breaks. Not enough sway and the bridge breaks under wind as well. And so there's always that perfect balance of sway. And so your risk capacity is how far your portfolio can swing without breaking. And risk tolerance is just that feeling you have while this is going on.
And why people feel this way is because when they start working with a financial firm, they get that little question and they say,
Yes.
"What's your risk tolerance?" And there's like 4 boxes.
Yes.
A lot of risk, conservative, all this other stuff, and they really aren't aware that is not. So when you think about that, if you were to rely on that only for planning, what kind of problems could that lead to?
So let's think of an example here. We've had a really good year. I'm meeting with a client, and I ask them, they're doing the questionnaire, and they go, "Oh, yeah, I'm aggressive. Yeah, I'm an aggressive client. I'm okay with 100% equities. Let's roll." And if I rely just on risk tolerance, I'm relying on their idea of risk during an up year, or maybe not just an up year, but a really good up year. And so I rely just on that. The moment we have a minor bump, 1%, 2% down, let's not even talk about 5, 6% down, I have a client that ends up freaking out. And it's because they've been feeling like they're an aggressive client, or they've been feeling like they're okay with taking on a lot of risk, only because maybe recently taking on that risk has allowed them to have such good returns. So
Sure.
When we rely just on risk tolerance, we put ourselves at danger of designing a portfolio based on how a client's felt just recently, maybe the past few months, maybe the past year. And it works the opposite way too, though. You might have a young client who can take on more risk, but maybe the market's been volatile lately, and so they end up saying they're a little more conservative, but maybe they have a 30-year time horizon.
Right.
And so, we design a portfolio that's too conservative. So the danger is either over-investing or under-investing, taking on too much risk or not taking on enough risk by just relying on that risk tolerance, just relying on their feelings in the moment.
So how do factors like time horizon, income needs, income sources, how does that really influence, a client's real risk capacity?
I think that's huge. And reason for that is if I had 2 clients, 2 identical portfolios, 2 identical demographics, makeup, personalities, and the only difference was, let's say they were both in their 50s, and the only real difference was that in one of the spouses had a pension plan. The presence of some sort of guaranteed income source, whether it be through a pension or any other guaranteed income sources, it actually allows us to, especially you still have to consider time horizon. But if you have 15, 20, 30, sometimes I've seen clients that have 40, 50% of their needs already met through a guaranteed income source. Their capacity, their risk tolerance may be the same, but their capacity to take on risk is actually greater than those without a guaranteed income source. Because if we have some volatility, if the market spills down a little bit, we already know that 30, 40, 50% of their needs are already going to be met through those guaranteed income sources.
Got to talk about this stuff with clients, right?
Yeah.
Because they tend to do things emotionally.
Yes.
Especially, and then they come to somebody. I assume it's pretty common. They get to a point where they feel like they're kind of in over their head a little bit, and they turn it over to you. And your job is to really just make sure that emotion's not part of it. It's math.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And it's a balancing act as well, because if I don't take into consideration their risk tolerance, we can end up building a plan that only a robot could follow.
Right.
So it's a balancing act between risk capacity, risk tolerance, building something that is not built on emotion, but does give a little leeway to the emotions of the client, so that we don't build something that's impossible for that client to follow.
We'll call it risk therapy.
Yes.
We'll call it.
That's good.
That's Alex Peyton with Actus Wealth Strategies in Acadiana, Louisiana. This is Retirement News Online. To find out more, see a bunch of news around retirement, visit retirementnewsonline.com. Thanks for watching.